Hello, everyone, and welcome to the XState office hours. Laura is out on holiday today, so I'm going to be doing my best, not impression of her, but just trying to lead this thing. So we didn't have office hours last week, and that's because last week was a pretty busy week. A couple of us were at the Infobip Shift conference, and that was one of the first in-person live conferences that I guess came back. So live conferences are coming back, and there were two talks. One was my own, and another was an excellent talk by Eric Rasmussen about wizard forms. So when those come out, I really encourage that you check it out. Let's, I guess Laura usually does a quick intro of everyone around the room. So Matthias, if you want to go first and quickly introduce yourself and what you do at XState, or Stately.
So I'm Anders on Twitter, and I'm just front-end engineer at Stately, trying to push things forward as much as I can.
All right, and Farzad?
Yeah, hey everyone, I'm Farzad, and I pretty much do anything, mostly front-end.
And Matt?
I'm Matt. I'm basically a sort of in-between version of Farzad and Anderist, but slightly budget version, you know.
Don't undersell yourself like that. But yeah, so we have a few exciting updates to share with you. They're relatively minor, but still really cool. First, we have some upcoming visualizer updates. An effort mostly led by Farzad is the embedded mode. So that's going to be making its way live soon. And so what this means is that not only can you embed your visualizer in an iframe, but you could also control different modes of it and control what you show. Farzad, do you want to talk about that a little bit more?
Sure, yeah. So with the embedded mode, you can configure it to have different types of views. You can either embed the entire visualizer in the full mode, or you can have the visualization only mode, or the panels way, only the panels. You can configure which panel is going to be activated by default. There's a lot of other controls, like if you want the panning or zooming to be enabled or not. There's a long list there, or if the editor needs to be read-only or not. And the idea is that we try to let everything be configurable, just because I personally want to use it differently in my personal blog and have it rendered side by side by some code sandbox code that's connected to the visualizer in the inspect mode. And that would be just an amazing MDX, an addition to your MDX interactivity in your blog if you're using the visualizer.
That's awesome. And yeah, we also have that preview, embed preview coming up. It is in PR. And if you all want to take a look at it, all of this is open source. So if you go to github.com/statelyai/xstate-viz, you could see all of our progress out in the open over there. And of course, if you just want to check out the visualizer, it's at stately.ai/viz. We also have a few minor improvements coming to the visualizer too, bug fixes, things like that. And all of that is before we ramp up our efforts on some of the other major projects that we're working on. One of them being the registry, which is being led by Matt Pocock, and also the visual editor, which is something that a lot of you have been asking for a long time. And so in this office hours, I'm going to make not a strong promise, but we're going to hopefully have a beta release out by mid to end October for you to preview. And obviously, we're not going to be letting everyone in, where it's sort of going to be an invitation list and gradually letting more and more people in, just so that we could make sure that we have all the bugs ironed out and all the use cases and features to be correct. So that is our general roadmap for the rest of the year. Oh yeah, also version 5. That's something that right now I have a huge PR that Matthias is a little bit scared of, because I made it like 100 file PR, but I shrank it down. Yeah, so there are some big changes coming to version 5. And also a lot of the same ideas and improvements that we have for version 5 we're trying to do as much as we can in version 4 as well. But hopefully by the end of the year, we should be able to have either an alpha or a full release of version 5. So I'm really excited about that. There are also some updates to XState, both in the documentation and in the in the actual API. So I'm just going to share my screen real quick. Where is it? Oh, sorry, trying to find it. It's somewhere here. But yeah, one of the big improvements is actually in the documentation. So you're going to notice, if you look at the documentation, something new. We have this introduction to state machines and state charts right over here. And if you click it, you're going to see a really, really excellent guide that gently introduces you to all of the main concepts of both state machines and state charts in a very visual, no-code way. And so there's zero code in this entire article, and it's also really easy to follow along with lots of adorable examples of compound states, parallel states, things like final states. So I really recommend, if you are trying to learn state charts and you don't want to dive into the code and have to deal with the huge learning curve that is the XState API, then I really recommend you read this first just to get an idea of the general concepts, because state charts are meant to be a primarily visual language. And so I think this article, written by Laura Kalbag on our team, does a really good job of describing all of the concepts in an easy to digest way. So please give that a read. And so, yeah, I quickly wanted to show off another cool addition that we had to XState, and that is, if this works correctly, there we go, states.can. So we have a simple toggle machine over here. I spun this up like literally 2 minutes before we actually started the office hours. But with state.can, you could determine if a state is going to change based on an event. So let's just console.log. Right now, the only event we have is toggle. But if we console.log state.can whatever, it should be false, which it is false. And of course, if we do state.can toggle, then that's going to be true. Now, where is this helpful? Well, this is mostly helpful for reducing duplication in logic when you're validating or disabling buttons and things like that. For example, this button, let's say it sends a toggle, but let's say that we only want it to be able to send a toggle when you actually can send a toggle. So I'm going to remove this transition, and we're going to say disabled equals not states.can toggle. And so this reads almost like plain English or pro. It's like disable it when you cannot toggle, which makes perfect sense. So you don't have to duplicate logic and say, are we in the inactive state, the active state? It doesn't matter. So now if I save that and I click, now you'll see that it is disabled. So it's extremely useful, and it also takes in full events. So you could do type toggle, toggle, and have whatever params you want in here. And it's going to work the exact same way. So there is documentation on this. So if we go to documentation and you go to states, over here, there are some examples of where this is useful. So please give it a try. We hope that state.can improves your development experience with XState. So yeah, another thing that is extremely exciting is something that Matt has been working on, which is the VSCode extension. So Matt, do you want to show that off?
Yeah. So the main kind of what I would love to use these kind of few minutes for is for you guys to think to yourselves, okay, what would I like to see in the VS Code extension? Because we are getting close, progressively closer to having a proper VS Code extension. It's very exciting. So, David, are you sharing my screen? I've just buggered off the window. Hang on 2 seconds. Okay. All right, so this is a VS Code window, and it's running the extension. And as I go through this, I want you to think, what would I like to see here? What could be improved? And what features would I like to add? Maybe I've implemented them already, or maybe they're yet to be implemented. Let's start with a const machine equals createMachine. And immediately here, what you can see is that as soon as we have a createMachine call, it opens up the inspector. Or rather, it gives you a button saying you can open up the inspector. And here what you'll see is, I'm fairly sure actually, yeah, there we go. We get our little machine here. Now, there's a little bit of sort of lagging here, as you'd expect. But what I can do is I can add various properties to this. So we have A, B, and C. And as you can see, it's visualizing the machine as I'm going. And we can, for instance, do like an on foo, let's say target B, for instance. And then we get this lovely little link here, and you can click through it and have a play with it. The other things that we get here sort of for free are auto-completion on transition targets. So inside here, we can say A, B, C, whatever. And of course, we get validation here too. So if there's a D here, child state D does not exist on machine. I can target this error better, like eventually this will just be on the actual thing itself, but for now, that's the validation you get. There's tons more stuff to do here as well. Like you can even go to definition on these targets. So you can go command click on the C, and it will take you to the C. Beautiful. And even here too, we get this kind of thing on actions too. So actions, let's say we want a say hello whenever we hear the foo event. Then if we declare the say hello downstairs here, so I always call this downstairs. I don't know why, like in the options definition, but here we go. We have a say hello event now, and we can command click between them. This works for actions, it works for guards, it works for services as well. It works for delay. Does it work for delays? Might not work for delays yet, but it will work for delays. What else have we got? Let me think. Well, the stuff I'm really excited about is the Typegen work. You'll notice I'm inside the XState repo on a particular branch that we're working on right now. And kind of what I would really like to be able to do is say, let's say we create a model up here. So const model equals createModel. And I'll import this from XState model. State lib model, I think, yeah. So we create a model, and these models are kind of like, we have events, and we have, so let's say we type our foo to be just like an empty event, and then we type our bar to be an event that has a value in it. And the value is going to be a string. So we've got our foo and we've got our bar. Now here, what I'm going to do is do model.createMachine. Kind of if you haven't seen this before, it's sort of a it's a new way of declaring kind of context and event types. And what I'm going to do is I'm just going to add a types property here, which is just going to be an empty object, and I'm going to save the file. So why didn't that work? That should have worked. I'm intrigued why that didn't work. But what it should have done, as import demo.typegen.typegen0. The idea is when you save this file for the first time, is you get this kind of thing automatically added. So now what we've got here is you'll notice that say hello is only ever caused by foo. That's the only event that can cause it. So when we go down into the options down here, you'll notice that context event.type equals, it's never going to be bar. Never, ever going to be bar. So here, this means that you get automatic kind of perfect typing in the actions, in the services, and in the guards. And the delays too, but I'm not sure if that's useful at all. So what that means is, for instance, when we go for a use machine, let's say I don't specify any of these actions here or any of these services, then when we go const equals use machine, and we pass in the machine, and it's erroring because I've not passed in the options that are required here. So expected 2 arguments but got 1. Let's try this in here. Actions, we get autocomplete on the actions too. And these actions are, again, typed to the events that cause them. Notice, by the way, that I've not saved the file this whole time. It's nuts. So Eric's asking, what is this types thing? Yeah, this is brand new. This is we can't deploy this to the live XState VSCode thing yet because it requires some buy-in from core and it requires like a specific XState version. So we've got to say hello here, and you can see that only now context event, only now event.value is specified. So you never ever need to know, you never need to do anything like this again. If event.type equals bar, none of that, all of that typing magic will go. And this also works so beautifully. Sorry, I'm taking a long time explaining this, but I just love it. It also works for promisified services too. So what you can do is you can say source is, I don't know, let's say fetch something. And what we can do is we can say inside here, this will improve, this will look better, but essentially we'll create like an event creator, which will say dom.invoke.fetch something. And this has to return, oops, that's got to be a function. And it's got to return data, which is a Boolean. And let's say data here. Now, again, this is erroring because I'm not passing the right stuff. So services, fetch something. We've got, first of all, our context and events, like event is being typed to bar, because that's the only way that we can get to this state because we're invoking it. And it's erroring because we're not passing the right thing back from our fetch something. So what it's got to return is return true, because it's returning the data. So cool. It means that our promise services can return exactly what we intend them to, and everything here is fully typed. If we then have an ondone inside here, no, that needs to be inside the invoke, ondone actions, console log data, then again, we're erroring, console log data and context event, and we have event.data, which is the Boolean that we're returning. So everything is fully typed. Everything is just gorgeous. And that's kind of the end of this demo so far. As you can see, of course, like, is there anything remaining? Oh yeah, we have like, so inside state here too, we can do state.matches, and then we get all of the states. If you're using tags as well, we can do C tags and like, wow, cool. And now state.tags or state.hasTag will be fully typed. Wow, cool. Everything's there. So this is, we're hoping that, like you have a couple of choices here. You can either use model, and that way it's kind of super integrated. You don't need to pass any generics whatsoever. Or you can do just plain old createMachine. And the way we'll work that is we'll do like your context type and your event type, and then you'll have to throw in any there for type states, but it will work like this basically. And you'll throw in that generic there, and we can automatically target this with the parser that we're building, that kind of thing. So yeah, any questions or any comments or any thoughts about where this could go, or tools that we kind of functions in this that we haven't built yet? What about the team? David, what do you think of all this?
I mean, I was saying in the chat that this is such an impressive live coding demo. Like, this is super conference worthy. But yeah, there is a lot of chatter in the chat. Everyone is extremely excited about these ideas. Awesome that we get validation. It will make us more productive when building our machines. Completely agree there. And yeah, so some of the stuff that you're building is, things that people expected to intuitively work already. So it's really nice to see that that's something that's coming in the future. So, people are saying this is extremely helpful. It's a proper game changer. When can we try this out? So there was a question about like getting buy-in for XState Core. And I believe Matthias right now is reviewing that PR. And basically, as it's gone with XState for the last few years, if Matthias approves, I approve. So that's how that's going to go. Yeah, this is going to be extremely helpful. And I think everyone is really excited about it. There was a question in the chat. Is there any problem with destructuring createMachine and assign out of createModel?
I don't think so. Let's try it. So you can take the model here and create a machine. And it should, in theory, if I just clean up the errors here, yeah, it'll still work. Like the parser is something that I've spent quite a lot of time on. And you can do really crazy stuff with it. So you can say, okay, I actually just don't want to specify my config here. Let me just, or actually a more common one is let me just take the options and put the options up here. So const options equals this. And then options, you can pass in there. And you still get all of the like the type goodness. It still knows it's part of the options. It will still pass it correctly. I'm not sure if you'll get autocomplete because you need to do something like machine options, this kind of thing. So, but yeah, but the parser has many strengths and it can do this. We're hoping that it will be able to work across files as well. And a really exciting thing is being able to track the relationships between your machines too. So if one machine is invoking another machine or spawning another machine, we can track that across the repo and hopefully even build like a tree view of all of your machines going, okay, this one spawns, this one spawns, this one spawns, this one, which is just going to be like Farzad, that's you're kind of the actor model spokesperson since you're React Demo talk. I imagine there's use cases that are popping into your head too.
Oh, yeah. There's oh, go ahead.
No, you go for it, David.
Oh, okay. I was going to highlight a question that someone asked real quick in the chat. Will the VS Code extension allow us to inspect machines in the same way as XState inspect?
Yes. Well, it's slightly different because the way that this parser works is it extracts only the information that it needs to in order to visualize the machine. Like it's not running your code, which is why it's so quick and why it's quite reliable and why it's sort of a little bit limited, but it's limited in a kind of way that benefits us. So what you're seeing here is it's not, if you do this, it's not going to run say hello as an action. And it's not going to run console log data or anything like that. And it's not going to run on any of your services. It's just extracting the bare information that it needs to know how everything works, essentially. So yeah.
Makes sense. And yeah, so there is another, this is a really good question in the chat. Is createModel always the recommended way to create machines to get the superior typing and VS Code extension support? For the first part, I would say right now, yes, createModel is sort of our very fancy band-aid for improving the typing. And there's a lot of cool stuff coming to createModel that's going to just enable a lot stronger typing, more so than just creating a plain machine. But I guess, Matt, you could answer the second part.
Yeah, it's by no means, basically the VS Code extension will work with either way, whether you want to use model.createMachine or whether you want to use the normal method, it will work the same way. You just need to get this import demo.typegen in there somehow, basically. So whether that's doing it via generic like this or whatever, or whether it's using model.createMachine and doing this, then it will work either way.
Awesome. And so I'm guessing that answers that question too. Is all this typegen tied to the VS Code extension?
So sort of. It is currently, but it doesn't have to be. This project sort of came out of my work with a previous project called XState CLI, which was a CLI, which does all of this stuff. The VS Code extension will be a better experience because it can generate the types while you type, essentially. So while you're changing things in the VS Code extension, it can be generating the types kind of on throttle or things like that. But we can do this with a CLI on save as well. So in the future, we'll have like an XState CLI, which will do all this stuff.
Yep, and that's exciting and sort of leads into this one. Will Webstorm users have a Viz plugin like VS Code? Now, I've never used Webstorm, nor do I, well, actually, yeah, I have. But I don't know if it, like the extension can be compatible with Webstorm, so not sure about this one.
I don't know either. I mean, a lot of what we're doing is not really tied to VS Code. It's like most of the complexity is around the parsing, which is in its whole other like library. And if the interest is there, then we'll consider building something bespoke for VS Code. But you'll certainly always have the XState CLI. Yeah, I think that's where we can leave it.
Awesome. Yeah. So if you're done sharing, I'll just remove the screen. And yeah, that was really, really awesome, and it's super exciting. So yeah, a couple other things I want to mention before we get to questions is some of our recent conference talks, especially by Matt, Farzad, and Laura, are up on the. Let me just pull this up. So if you go to the React Finland YouTube channel, which is at youtube.com/c/React Finland. Search for their names or for State Machines, and you're going to see all 3 of their videos there. So if you missed it in the live conference, now you have a chance to rewatch it there. So yeah, please go check out those videos. They're amazingly excellent videos, from the intro of State Machines and state charts all the way to how you would refactor legacy code and the actor model. So really, really informative talks. Please go check them out. So yeah, I guess we could get to questions now, or comments. So one of the comments by Natalie, improvements to the actor model tooling would help our team a lot if we were to adopt that in the rest of our systems. And so this is an area that I definitely want to explore more, because right now our visualization efforts have been primarily focused on the individual machine and just understanding how the behavior of that machine works. But what is more important, or not more important, but what's additionally important, is visualizing actors and how they communicate with each other. So that's why, like in the old inspector, we have sequence diagrams. We want to bring those as well to the new visualizer and inspector. But we also want to be able to visualize the hierarchy of the entire actor system, just because I think that's going to be really useful in understanding how the different parts of your system communicate with each other. And note that it might not just be a tree. Like, with many discussions we've had in the Discord, actors can communicate with each other if they have a reference to each other. So it doesn't necessarily need to be a clean tree hierarchical-like structure. So visualizing that is going to be super important. And we have some ideas, including some influence from Erlang and the way that it visualizes that. So yeah, just we're keeping that in mind. And I think that, it is a pain point, and it is something that we do need to address. So yeah. Yeah, so she said, is navigation within actor systems versus classes and functions, which that makes sense. It's a different way of thinking about it. So yeah, let's see. Another comment, createModel has been a game changer for me. That's excellent to hear, because createModel allows us to do a lot more than what you could do with createMachine in terms of typing. So just look forward to some of the ideas and additions we have there. Some of them which are in our Discord. So if you go to our Discord at discord.gg/xstate and you go to the ideas channel, we throw ideas every now and then, and some of them actually make it to to actually be part of the API, like state.can. So let's see, other questions. This one's for Matt. Will XState CLI be compatible with Docker environments? For example, will it be possible to bundle the CLI in a custom Docker image and run while development?
Yeah, probably. We'll probably write it in Node, given that there's a lot of expertise in the team there. And yeah, so that means you can grab it off NPM, do whatever you like with it. So certainly you'll be able to run it wherever Node runs. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's exciting. Here's an interesting one. Has a new SSG, or server-side static site generator. I always forget what the 2 S's stand for. Static site generator for the documentation site been selected. Astra looks promising. I would say not yet. Right now, we're heavily using 2 things. The first is ViewPress for the current documentation, and the next is Next. So we're using Next both for our website, the registry, the visualizer, And so it makes sense to at least start with using Next for static site generation. However, Astro does look promising, and it's something that we want to play around with, maybe do a couple spikes on, and potentially in the future use it, just because we really like how Astro is very low JS, but only JS when you need it. So it has that islands architecture. So if we want to show interactive demos, especially in other frameworks, like we might want to demo, here's how you use a state machine in Vue. We could add Vue in there, we could add React in there, and still deliver minimal JavaScript. So yeah, I like Astro. You know, it's not the final decision, but we'll see what happens.
David's been lobbying for Astro for quite a while, actually.
Yeah.
I'm the stick in the mud who wants to stick with Next, but
right,
David's
yeah.
very pro Astro.
It's good to have that balance because, you know, Astro is sort of that shiny object syndrome, but at the same time, it's like, you know, they're very much founded on very old ideas, like how the web was 10 years ago, which is cool. But as far as productivity, Next might be our best bet since we're all already experienced in Next.
Super cool team at Astro as well. Really smart people working on that.
Yeah. And that's one of the reasons I want to at least play around with it. Let's see, graph rendering when? I'm assuming that this has to do with the actor discussion. Like there are some really cool ideas with visualizing actors and actor systems. And that's something where, you know, I would love to play around with D3 or other rendering engines for, just so that we could visualize all those actors communicating with each other. And it's a little bit different of a visualization than a state machine because it's very much fluid, whereas a state machine is very, you know, flexible. So, an actor model is very flexible. So yeah, gonna play around with that. Let's see. In your opinion, what is the best tool for sketching up state machines? Let's see. Anyone want to answer that? Like, well, what do you usually use besides XState?
Well, I commented on YouTube pen and paper, but to be honest, it's just too messy because you're going to have to like rethink your process. I personally use Visualizer. When we were building the Visualizer, we actually used it for, we dog-fooded it. So we made our machines using the Visualizer for the Visualizer because it was just faster, you know. The same way that you use HTML and CSS for sketching than using Photoshop or other applications.
Yeah. Eric said, I'm a fan of Excalibur. And so while, yeah, I completely agree, you know, pen and paper or pencil and paper is good at first for quickly sketching up something. And if you already know XState, then you could actually be really productive in the XState visualizer. Eric is a fan of Excalibur. I'm also a fan of Excalibur, although it's a little bit manual to set up. Like you have a rectangle for the states, you have the text there, you have to draw the arrow, and then make another rectangle and text to connect the states. The future editor that hopefully we could preview to you in October is very much going to be a simple drawing experience of double click to add a state, drag, drop, boom, you have your other states, type in your event, type in your states, and you're done. And so it's going to be like Excalibur, but easier. And also it actually generates the code for you. So this is something we're super excited about. And we hope that the editor is going to be probably the best way to create user flows, state machines, state charts, flow charts, whatever kind of graph directed graph chart you want to draw.
Probably when the editor comes out, it's going to beat every other option out there. But we might be able to deliver supporting Lucy as a DSL in the visualizer before that, especially because not everybody would get access to the beta editor until the end of the year.
Yeah, that was actually something that Chris Coyer tweeted out. He had 2 bookmarks open for a while. He had the Stately Visualizer, and he had Lucy. So if you don't know Lucy, I think it's at lucylang.org. I'm just going to put this up real quick so you can copy it.
When Lucy came out, at first, I was working with Matthew, and we spent like a week trying to integrate Lucy into the old visualizer using a Chrome extension. It worked great. It was compiling and all, but then me and David, we got into discussing the new visualizer and safety and all that. So we're just thinking about, building the support natively in the new visualizer for that. And not just Lucy, any other DSL, maybe someday Markdown.
Yeah, Markdown, Lucy, plain JSON. And also, I think in the future, we have a lot of wild ideas for the future. I was joking with the team that we probably have a minimum of 5 years worth of ideas. But some of these ideas too are like things that already exist, such as GitHub Actions and creating them in YAML. We want you to be able to just copy and paste your GitHub Actions, put it in the visualizer or in the editor, and have that be visualized too. So we want to visualize a lot more than XState in the future. And we want to be able to compile to multiple targets, including Lucy or other custom DSLs too. John Lombard said, I hear TL draw is pretty extensible. If you don't know what TL draw is an up and coming visual like drawing tool, sort of like Excalidraw by Stephen Ruiz, who he's a big advocate of state machines and state charts too, and he's just a genius when it comes to creating all of these visual tools. So I really highly recommend checking out TL Draw. It's super cool. So let's see what else here. Here's a question. When do you switch from internal states to a state machine? So at which point do you start benefiting from adding the library to your project and writing a state machine? So actually, this has been something that I've been meaning to write for a while. Is just like a 3-minute introduction to XState, because there's actually a pretty short learning curve or shallow learning curve when you're starting with XState, and that's something that I feel like a lot of people don't really realize. So I'm going to quickly spin up an example here and share my screen. Here we go. Window. Let's see. Here we go. Okay, so I have this example template over here, and I'm just going to show you the code. If you're working on an app, it doesn't matter which framework you're working on. By far, the quickest way to get started with XState, and I'm just going to delete everything so that we're truly starting from scratch here, is you have a machine, create machine, and there you go. This is the simplest way to create a machine. It doesn't really do anything, but this is a valid machine. And this is what's called a single state or combinatorial machine. I didn't pick the name combinatorial. That's just what Wikipedia said. But it's basically a state machine with one state. And so if you think about your typical reducer that you would write, you have your states and you have your events. And so by state, I mean the actual data in your application. So we could say like count 0. And then you have on. And so in on, you would put all of the events that could happen that changes that data or that context. So, we could increment, and then we have actions assign. Count, we want to increment the count by 1. And so you could do the same for decrementing. And so if you're trying to introduce XStates to a team, just basically you could say, this is your reducer. Your typical state event reducers that you've been writing for the last few years. Basically the same thing, just in sort of an object format. And this is how you could get started. And then you just you could have const service equals interpret machine.start, and you're good to go. You could say service.send inc. And so we could also check on transition state console.log states.context, just so we could see the value. Let's fork that. And so if you open up your console, now you can see that we have count 1. So let's increment a few times, and you see that it's going up. So your simple counter example right over here, this is how to get started with XState in basically under 3 minutes. And so what's great about this is that once you have more complex logic, you don't have to refactor everything and redo everything. All you have to do is add states. So like initial active, states, active, So notice here, I have an object. What I'm going to do is I'm just going to move all of this to there. So now all of these events are only available in that active state, and you can see everything is still working the same. And we could have a different behavior like inactive behavior. And so those events could either not be handled or do something differently over there. So it makes it really easy to just refactor and move things around. And also, you could use either Matt's VSCode extension, or you could use the XState inspector or visualizer at stately.ai/viz and just do this all in there. So you really are able to just gradually make your way to more and more advanced concepts of state machines by doing this. And you don't have to jump into having to know absolutely everything about state machines and state charts at the very beginning. You could get started in 3 minutes. Yeah, hopefully that answered your question.
I think the line is basically if you're using useState, for instance, in React, and you're happy with useState, and you never need like a use effect or anything like that, then maybe XState isn't going to be the thing for you. Whereas if you ever feel the need to bump to use reducer, then you should just go straight to use machine, essentially, because a state machine is always going to be a better version of a reducer, because something even David didn't talk about is you can even co-locate side effects like fire in effect actions or something with your reducer. You know, you can say, because that's something you usually can't do in reducers. You can't usually say, okay, inside my reducer, I want to show a toast, for instance, when something happens. Whereas in XState, you can just do that inside an action.
Exactly.
Another point is there's always a concept of eventual complexity. Your code might not sound complicated right now, but it will eventually get complicated. So you're better off modeling it in the state machines right now.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, exactly. So, and yeah, with state machines and state charts, effects, also known as actions in state machines and state charts, are treated as a first-class citizen just because we feel it is vital to how your application works. Try writing an application with 0 side effects. It will not do anything. It will not work at all. So, you know, that's why managing these actions and side effects is really important. There was a question. This is actually one of many. Someone mentioned it in the on Twitter too. And it's talking about a router solution that syncs with XState. Have you all solved this problem? No worries for nagging. We've definitely thought about the problem, and we've been discussing it in the ideas channel. Nothing solid yet. Still a lot of things to think about. But yeah, we're figuring it out slowly. Eric says, "Great paint job on your wall, Matt." So
thanks. Yeah. It's lovely.
It's an original peacock.
It's a work in progress, just like the router.
Listen, development is all about incremental improvement. It's not, can't expect the first version of everything to be perfect.
Right. Yeah. Speaking of Matt, Matt made a tool called Sextant, which means sixth, I think, which is cool for actor, or whatever Sextant stands for. It's cool for actor modeling. Will it integrate with XState too?
No, I think Sextant is, I was using it as a tool to sort of explore actor modeling and especially in my previous job where I was more responsible for kind of back-end architecture and more DevOpsy stuff, I was using it as a way to model like different lambdas and different things sending events to each other as a way to document things and maybe write tests. As I moved further and further on with it, I kind of decided that I wanted to rip out all the code that it produced, because the idea was that you'd create these beautiful diagrams and then it would produce code. And then I saw the code that it produced and I saw the way it was making me code and I didn't really like it. So I fell out of love with it, really. And I feel like everything that we're doing at Stately is a sort of continuation of that dream, really. So currently Stately is greater than Sextant. And by the way, a Sextant is a little compass.
Navigation tool.
Exactly. A little navigation tool used to track stars.
Okay. Yeah. Awesome. Yeah. So question from Natalie. What is a suggested way to build higher order state machines? I'll quickly answer. There's two ways in which state machines compose. The first way is state machine factory functions. So you could have functions that create state machines. And so that's one of the most straightforward ways. And the other, probably less straightforward, is state machines composed via actor communication. So just like you would just like you would scale up microservices and have like different microservices to different things, you would also do the same with state machines. So if you want to, like, let's say a state machine does a specific behavior and you want to debounce it, you might have a debounce actor that then communicates with that state machine. So it's sort of like having two people on a team where one person is in charge of sending events to the other person, but this first person is going to debounce those events so that the other person gets those in a debounce fashion. And so you have separation of responsibilities. This actor has no idea that the events are being debounced, and this actor has no idea what the other actor is going to do with those events. And so they compose pretty well via just communicating messages. So, yeah.
This is a complicated question, though, because there's loads of ways that you could compose machines. You know, like you could have like a piece of state, like that you just create out of a function, for instance, and you use in lots of different places. You know, like this is something I've been thinking about for like XState query or for XState form, is having kind of like a special sort of, especially in XState form, a special gathering form data state that you can send events to, and you can grab all the data and it will save it in context. There's a lot of different ways that you could do it. I think our documentation is quite loose on it, and there's sort of lots of potential ways you could go. So I don't think we have any strong recommendations. Farzad, you were doing some thinking about this before as well, right?
Yeah, we were like, because composition, when it's just about, adding side effects, is easy. You either respond an actor or you add the notation of those serialized action. You just don't provide the implementation. You can just do it ad hoc. But when it comes to restructuring the state, it gets really tricky. And I remember that we were internally discussing a better API as to how we can restructure the state without compromising on the initial structure. That's a very, very tricky problem to solve. And we don't even know yet that restructuring a behavior is even a good idea in the first place. But yeah, I like spawning actors on demand more than having factory functions, because factory functions are still tightly coupled to the implementation. But with actors, you can just add the signal for incremental features later on, and input can be debounced or not, as David said. You can put the notation there, serialized there. You just have to implement it whenever you need it. Right,
exactly. This question is for Matt, or comments. I thought about something ages ago about a types roadmap for Lucy, but can't find anything about that now. Don't know if you talked about that yet.
It's cool. It's there is an issue on the Lucy repo for basically type gen with Lucy. So because Lucy can statically understand all of the states that your machine can be in, it can do similar stuff to what we're trying to do with the VSCode extension, but just as part of its as normal part of its operating thing. You don't need any code gen. All you need is Lucy to run, and it will print out some output, and it will be beautifully fully typed, like with the events that cause the actions and things like that. So yeah, really exciting. I think that issue's been open for a while. We're bringing this, Mateusz is bringing this PR into core that's going to make the typings a lot easier and more integrated. So hopefully Matthew picks that up and we can roll with it.
Yeah, awesome. So there was a question on the Discord. How can we volunteer for beta access to the editor? Well, you just did. So what we're going to be doing is probably, just talking to people in the community, whoever's using at least the visualizer a lot, who's using XState in some, big projects in their company, and who could benefit most from the editor. And so, yeah, that's why we're going to be doing it like invitation first. Yeah, but yeah, you volunteered, so thanks for that. But yeah, let's see. Is there an example someone can point to for a factory? So factory for a machine is just a function that returns a machine. So I wouldn't know if there's any like good examples.
I know a real world example that I can just describe right now. I don't have the code for it right now, but basically if you're using state charts or XState for building the UI components, sometimes components need to have dynamic context. Let's say you have a slider, an image slider that you don't know whether it needs to be infinite or not, or you don't know whether it's right to left or left to right. So these can be augmented using the factory. And that basically can generate a dynamic context object for the machine implementation based on the configuration that you pass to it.
You can still do quite a lot where even without factories, if you only obey the interface that the machine kind of provides, and the interface are basically events that it exposes, then you can reuse machines across different contexts, if only that use case is similar, of course.
But there's a better use case, Matias, and that is when, for example, you need data slider to be autoplayed or not, then you don't know whether you need the delayed transition there or not. So a factory function is a really good use case for that, because that touches the structure of the events and states.
Yeah, but that you can kind of configure using options given in the context, like feature flags. So you don't necessarily have to dynamically create that machine. That machine can be defined statically, and you can only like toggle on and off features in it. It of course complicates the kind of like the final machine. But on the other hand, because it will be bigger, because it will contain all of those transitions, etc., because they will be in fact in place there. But on the other hand, like in the code, that complexity will still be there if you generate that. So it only kind of spills onto the diagram. But then you can have that single diagram that depicts all of those use cases instead of, I don't know, like printing 4 different blueprints out of a single one. That's I don't know how that would even work given the Visual Studio Code extension and stuff like that. So it also kind of like this way, you're producing machines through factories, at least would bring some additional complexities for us. So I'm sure how much we want to invest in that at the moment. But because I was thinking about that actually this week, and I have implemented such a machine, or I kind of reused one within our implementation, because we had 2 very similar machines implemented for tracking pointer when dragging things. So one was implemented in the canvas to just pan it around, and the second one was for the resizable box, so to just slide the editor panel left and right. So, but the whole interaction was basically very, very similar. So I was able to reuse the very same machine in both places, and that machine was only communicating with different parent at the call site A and at the call site B. But the machine itself and like this pointer tracking, etc., stayed the same, because that was literally the same. Like I have that in a PR, so hopefully we'll be able to land that in another week.
One interesting case for it too is. Sorry, Mutation. Another interesting case is for TypeScript reasons as well. Sometimes you want to specify that a machine has certain dependencies, or for instance, like a service is specified in a certain way, and it returns a certain type of data. With a typegen, that may not be necessary, but one thing that will always be useful is passing generics to the machine as well. So if you want a kind of generic data fetching machine that fetches different data based on certain things, what you can do is just say, okay, I declare my machine this way. I declare like the variables that need to be passed to the fetch and the data that comes back, and then that will just propagate through the whole machine if you set the generics up right. So it's a very, very neat for TypeScript reasons too.
All right, since we're adding these use cases, let me just add something else. If you're pulling different implementation, let's say that you have a switch case for different implementations of a machine, and then you basically, based on the configuration that you receive, want to return one of those. The ones that are not used, when you're doing a statically compilation, then they can be tree shaken out of your bundle. Something really, really rare to happen, but yeah.
Sounds good.
Oh, right. Sorry, I was just told that we forgot a YouTube question. Yeah, but yeah, this definitely elicits a much bigger discussion. But yeah, so oh yeah, it was will there be actor state rehydration so that you can spawn them from a persisted state? I think this question is about here. Let me just put it up in the banner real quick. Sorry if I can't find it right away. Will there be actor state rehydration? Yes, there will be. That's something that I'm working on right now. Hopefully a PR soon. And so this is something that we've actually been talking about with regards to fast refresh too. Matthias was talking about like it would be nice to have both fast refresh, allowing us to change the machine's states when you refresh the application, or actually persist the states, and have it still work, and also have all of the actors rehydrate as well. Actor state rehydration is a bigger question because it does need to work in different ways depending on your environment, whether you're doing things client-side, where if you make a fetch request, reload your browser, that fetch request is forgotten, and server-side, where if you make a fetch request or async request and the like the virtual machine is off, or you're using a serverless context, it's still going to come back and say, hey, I'm here, and it's going to just wake up that serverless function. So you might not want to replay that persisted actor. So there's a lot of just different use cases that we have to think about there. Yeah, we have a lot of questions today. I guess one that Matt can answer quickly. Matt is a big proponent for invoked callbacks. What are some nice use cases for them?
I have a very nice article that explains why I love invoked callbacks. You can check it out. I'll send David the link so you can stick it up. Basically, they're great for almost anything. It's incredibly flexible API. If you want a cancelable promise, for instance, so like you want to use a fetch and with like a abort controller, for instance, then you can try to resolve the fetch and try to, where's my brain going? Send the event back to the parent. Or if you want to leave the state early, then you can cancel it with an abort controller. It's useful for WebSockets, useful for all sorts of stuff, file uploads, loads.
Yeah, if you ever used Redux and you wish that your thunks could talk back to you, and you could communicate with your thunks at the same time, then yeah, that's what invoked callbacks are. They're like thunks, but super powered.
Fixed thunks, basically.
Yeah, exactly.
Oh, did we mention DOM events?
In what regard? Oh yeah, for invoked callbacks. Yeah. Yeah, that's what I use them most for, actually. So if you want to have an actor that is just responsible for window resize or mouse move or just some other DOM event, invoked callbacks are probably the best way to do that. So completely agree there. And you could manage your lifecycle as well. So you could remove the event handler and make sure that that's cleaned up automatically when you leave that state.
But yeah, so XState catalog, there's a good example for tab focus that uses that.
Yeah. You know what? We need a banner for XState catalog. It's XState catalog, so the British spelling.com, correct?
Yeah.
There we go. So please visit the British version of XStateCatalog.com.
I should buy the other domain and do a redirect, actually.
You really should. It's definitely a good idea. Or we could have a stately.ai/catalog. I think that'd be a great addition too. All right.
Or
so
we could just build it as a showcase on the registry.
Yeah. That's an awesome idea. All right. So we're coming up on time. We're coming up on the hour, and I just want to thank everyone for your excellent questions and feedback in today's longer than expected office hours, but it's awesome. We had a ton of things to talk about, especially since we didn't have office hours last week. And if you want to see more today, like you didn't get enough live streaming action, I'm actually, we're going to tackle one of the remaining 7 GUIs challenges using XState on the keyframers live stream. So if you go to youtube.com/keyframers, that's where we'll be at around 1 p.m. So 3 hours from now, 1 p.m. Eastern time. And I know that Farzad and Matt are also planning on doing some live streams in the near future as well. So look forward to that.
Yeah, the plan is we're going to fail on modeling state charts online, so everybody can see that.
Yeah, failure is the best way to learn. So yeah, thank you all for joining the office hours, and we hope to see you next time.
See you all.